Okay, next up, SB 80. We talked about this on Thursday, Chris, by Senator Greg Miller. This is a bill that allows the Secretary of State to censor the voice of the people, to basically ban citizens from exit polling and finding out what really happened at their polling site.
Danielle, this is probably among the top 2 or 3 most disturbing pieces of legislation of the session. Governor Landry has a responsibility to the citizens of Louisiana to veto this bill. There's no question about it. We have a call to action up on it demanding that he veto this. There's also a phone number that's on the call to action. He needs to veto this bill. There's no question. Right now, Governor Landry, with regard to his conservative base in Louisiana, Danielle, is about 2/3 sunk in quicksand. If he wants to go down the final third under the quicksand, he should sign this legislation into law, because this will be the acid test of whether or not he really does believe in the Constitution, whether or not he really does embrace the principles that he ran on, which is to protect Louisiana citizens from this type of arbitrary government overreach. And this will basically make a liar out of him if he doesn't veto this bill. If he does, then he's got a faint hope of reviving his credibility with his base.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom. We're so happy to be with you today. We just want to remind you that we are live on Tuesdays and Thursdays now, this week and next week, 8 a.m. After that, we're going to go back to our normal time of 10, which is a lot more humane. But through session, we'll keep it at 8 a.m. And you can find us on Rumble. We're easier to find on Rumble now. Put in the search, the State of Freedom, and we have a new channel up that you can find with a search there. And then you can find us on YouTube and X, we're Freedom State US. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, so almost everywhere. So give us a like and a follow there. If you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, that would be awesome too. But maybe we'll just get into it a little bit. So week, we're kind of sprinting to the finish here, and so far, what we have to report, it feels a lot like with friends like these, who needs enemies. But we have a lot to cover as usual. Some stuff on Secretary of State's powers, making Louisiana healthy again, encroachments on your property rights, or just improvements on the encroachments to your property rights, and some updates with regards to insurance. So before we get into all of that exciting stuff, let me read the scripture of the day. I in particular need it. Okay. It's Proverbs chapter 2, verses 2-5. And it says, "So train your heart to listen when I speak, and open your spirit wide to expand your discernment. Then pass it on to your sons and daughters. Yes, cry out for comprehension and intercede for insight. For if you keep seeking it like a man would seek for sterling silver, searching in hidden places for cherished treasure, then you will discover the fear of the Lord and the true knowledge of God." And sometimes the war we're in, and Chris, you and I were talking about this before we went on air, but sometimes it feels like the war that we're in now is even more fraught and intense than when we clearly knew that the enemies of the people were in power. And this is a time that's marked with deception, and where those that we thought were fighting with us are fighting against us. The war for our minds, our allegiances, and our futures is fierce. And everywhere you look, it seems like people are lying. And it's easy to feel like we're living in a constant whirlwind of confusion, bewilderment, and anger. But this is why it's so important to seek the Lord, to ask for his vision, his perspective, to learn to hear his voice, because he leads us into all truth. And confusion, anxiety, and fear are not from him. Our portion from the Lord is peace, wisdom, discernment, and understanding. So if we want to win this war for ourselves, for our children, for our children's children, it's absolutely imperative that we pursue the Lord very purposefully and very diligently. It's the only way we're going to be able to fight from a place of truth and purity for real justice. We see so many people get compromised along the way, and I have to think that that's the off-ramp they took. They just didn't stay close to the Lord. They didn't continue to seek the Lord, because if they did, we would see them still on our side.
Yeah, and Danielle, it's easy to get off track. It's easy to veer off and take the easy path,
Yeah.
particularly when things get difficult and challenges arise, and you do get betrayed, and by the very people who you thought would stand with you, some of whom you helped to get elected, and they
Yeah.
make votes here and there that you just can't understand. And there's only one of two things that you can conclude from that: either one, they didn't understand the legislation, or number two, they did understand the legislation and they have begun to cave in to the big special interest groups and the deep pocketed lobbyists who have their own agenda, and they have forgotten who elected them. And, one of the things that I try to keep in mind always is that regardless of the outcome, regardless of how Republicans vote, we can always provide the unvarnished truth, the information to the voters, the information to the constituents about specifically what the issues are and where the Republicans stood by name on the issues. And then the voters can make their decision about whether or not these people need to be reelected or not. But before us, I don't think there was any group that meticulously tracked the votes, talked about the issues that matter, just to make sure that the public understands really what's going on. So that's what we're doing, and we're advocating for the right things. And there's a saying that, when you act on proper principles, sometimes the reward is in the struggle rather than in the victory itself, because you're honoring God, and God will bring about the vindication and the victory. And that's an absolute guarantee. And we see that over and over in the scripture, where great leaders suffer losses in battles, and yet God always brings him through victorious and vindicated in the end. And it's a time of testing. There's no question it's a time of testing. But many people veer off, walk away, and take the easy path when they start to be tested. And
Yeah.
we're not going to do that. We're going to stay faithful. We're going to stay true. We're going to continue forward, and we're going to focus on the good things and the silver lining, and also focus on the things that we have to talk about that have disappointed us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said, Chris. Did you see? I saw in the news yesterday that Jeff Landry went to Moon Griffon's studio. Did you see that? And he dropped off 2 turkeys.
I
He
did not see that.
He said that it was because of all of Moon's turkey talk, which I interpreted as his criticism of Jeff. So I just found that kind of weird. What are you making fun of him telling the truth about you?
Yeah, it might have been an allusion also to the fact that he went turkey hunting 2 weeks before the most important insurance reform legislative session started. Goes turkey hunting in Texas with the two biggest trial lawyers in Louisiana. Not a
Jeff
very good
did.
look. And I
Jeff
don't
did,
think
not
that,
Moon.
yeah, Moon Griffon is not one to mince words. And I think that Moon has probably been being very, very blunt about his opinion and assessments of this session, and the way Governor Landry has approached this.
Well, good. Well, good. I wonder how many turkeys will get delivered to us, Chris.
Well, I wish instead of dropping 2 turkeys off, he had dropped 2 rhinos off and left them there.
All right. Well, let's get into it. Speaking of the governor, he has already signed at least one bill into law, probably more. But this is one we were not following. And it was brought by Representative Jeff Wiley, House Bill 148. And this bill, when you were telling me about this bill last night, Chris, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I just didn't even know where to put myself. Would you just talk to us a little bit about this? And then we can kind of talk a little bit about how the votes fell to get us here.
Yeah, sure. This has to do with the Commissioner of Insurance, Danielle. In some states, the Commissioner of Insurance is not authorized to either reduce or raise rates. It's totally driven by the market. He's not authorized to, issue a refund of premiums or order an insurance company to do that, or order, as I said, to raise insurance rates. In some
Because he's
states,
because he's not a dictator, because he's a
exactly.
commissioner of
Yes.
insurance.
And in some states, the insurance company, like Florida, the insurance company is allowed to raise and lower insurance rates and that sort of thing, adjust things like that. But he has to do it based on objective actuarial data, based upon market principles. And he's held accountable for the extent to which he bases his decisions on those principles. So there is a guidepost for him to make those decisions. There is a bill in Louisiana that just passed that, by the way, was opposed by our insurance commissioner precisely because he believes in free market principles and that insurance rates should be driven by the market, what the market will bear. And so he opposed the legislation, but this legislation pushed by Governor Landry authorizes the insurance commissioner in Louisiana to reject an insurance request increase rate from an insurance company, or to order an insurance company to issue premium refunds to their policyholders, or order policyholders to pay more in premiums. And he can do all of this based upon his own whim, on his own political calculations, on what is in his own political personal best interests, on no objective criteria. All the bill says is that the insurance commissioner, in making these critical determinations about insurance rates and premiums and that sort of thing, may consider sound actuarial principles, may consider market conditions and the things that typically drive the economy, but he's under no obligation to do so. So what this bill does essentially is vest plenary and complete and total authority in the insurance commissioner to control insurance rates in Louisiana and insurance premiums with no accountability and no objective criteria by which he has to make these decisions. That's what this bill does.
And Chris, you were very clear when we were talking that this is something that gives the Commissioner of Insurance unfettered ability to be able to target his political enemies, people who did not support him or her in the race to become Commissioner of Insurance, and really to run roughshod over the population. And it just sounds so communistic to me. It sounds like it's something that flies in the face of the free market, absolutely, and will go very far to drive insurance companies out of this state. It does the exact opposite of what we're looking to do. And I question who Jeff Landry is loyal to. I really question it now. I mean, I've questioned it before, but this to me just shows that he does not care one iota about the insurance rates for the people. He doesn't care that people are being driven out of their homes. What he cares about is scoring political points with the people who paid him to get this position. And I'm sorry if that offends people. I'm sorry if that hurts people's feelings. I'm sorry if that colors their view and they want to continue to think good things about Jeff Landry. But this is an absolute assault on our ability to compete as a state for insurance companies that people can afford.
Yeah, Daniel, what do you think exactly? What do you think? How do you think insurance companies are going to respond to this, knowing that they're going to come and set up business in a state where the insurance commissioner can go back any number of years and look at the premiums that have been collected by an insurance company and order them to refund money to policyholders because they've charged too much in insurance premiums retroactively? Okay. Do you think they're going to come to Louisiana and settle knowing they're under that kind of scrutiny and under that kind of unaccountable power that can affect their bottom line that drastically going back years and years? Do you think that citizens are going to want to come to Louisiana or stay in Louisiana if they live here, if they know that an insurance commissioner can go back 5, 10, 15 years and say, you know what, I don't think the Louisiana citizens, you haven't been paying enough in premiums to insurance companies, so I'm going to order collectively that the insurance companies collect more in premiums from the citizens. And he can make these decisions on his own with no accountability, no testing, and no verification whatsoever, because this law does not require him, it does not hold him to any objective actuarial standards to make these determinations. This is a situation that just is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for political abuse. And what happens, Danielle, if you have an insurance, let's just say in the next election, you have 3 or 4 people running for insurance commissioner, and one of those candidates who doesn't believe in this policy loses. And let's say he is an insurance executive, okay, and he loses the race and he has advocated publicly against vesting this kind of authority in the insurance commissioner and repealing this law, and he loses. And he's associated with insurers in Louisiana. You don't think the guy who wins is going to have an eye to some kind of political payback of that losing candidate who ran for insurance commissioner, maybe a prominent figure in Louisiana? And nothing will stop him from being able to do that. What about citizens who publicly oppose a candidate on these grounds and yet he wins? You don't think that there's a possibility he could raise their premiums in political retaliation? This is just unbelievable that this kind of centralized power would be vested in one man with no criteria and no accountability. This is just a horrible, horrible bill. The only thing that would make this worse would be if Royce Duplessis's SB 214 somehow gets through the Senate and gets to Governor Landry's desk, allowing the commissioner of insurance to be appointed by the governor. That's the only silver lining to this, is that we still have an elected insurance commissioner instead of an appointed one.
Yeah. And let's talk about the position this puts Tim Temple in. So here he is trying to recruit new insurance companies to come to the state, trying to say, look, we're doing everything we can to make this friendly. So now he's got to say, look, yeah, we do have this law, but I don't believe in it. I've been set up for failure. Please come anyway. Are you kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? I'm going to do a call. Every attorney that's listening to this show, anyone who's listening to this show who knows an attorney or knows someone in the insurance industry, please sue the government for this. Please find a way to sue the government and get this law repealed, because it is an absolute slap in the face to every citizen of Louisiana, especially those with high insurance rates.
Exactly. And Danielle, I spoke to a couple of officials in the government. I'm not going to name any names, but I'll tell you what's going on here. There's no question about it. Governor Landry supported this legislation not because he thinks it's good, not because he thinks it's based on good policy. He did it so a year from now, or a year and a half from now, when he's running for a couple of years from now, when he's running for re-election, and this law has been in place for a year and a half or 2 years, and his insurance package has achieved nothing that it was supposed to achieve, guess what he can do? He can just blame Commissioner Tim Temple. Because guess what, Commissioner Temple? You had the power to reject insurance rate increase requests. You had the power to order refunds. You even had the power to make policyholders pay more if it was unfair. All the powers in your hands. You could have handled this, and you didn't. That's why Governor Landry is pushing this legislation, because it's terrible.
If he spent half as much time trying to move the state forward in a meaningful way, instead of playing these dirty tricks and these shenanigans that are patently illegal, patently against the citizens. You think about the congressional redistricting, Chris, the shenanigans that got played there. If he would have just played it straight, we would have another member of Congress that we could count on. Potentially. Well, we would probably have, I don't know if we'd have Elbert Guillory, because the lines would have been different. But the point is, you can almost guarantee that there would have been at least one more Republican in the Congress, and you could guarantee that we would not be wasting taxpayer dollars to go and fight against ourselves, to pay the Attorney General to go and fight against our interest with the Supreme Court. And this is just another example of the way that he's fighting against the people.
Exactly. No question about it. This is not in the best interest of the citizens. And you know what? Tim Temple, Danielle, by the way, adamantly opposes this legislation, even though it does enhance his power. It gives him tremendous power. The reason why he opposes this legislation is because he believes it is dangerous. It is dangerous to put this kind of arbitrary power in the hands of one official in the executive department. And I don't believe Tim Temple thinks that the commissioner of insurance should be in the business of adjusting insurance rates. This is not, we don't live in a system that is founded in principles of governmental regulation. We live in a system that is based in free market principles, and what the competitive market will bear, those should be the rates. And these arbitrary adjustments of insurance rates should not exist. He thinks it's dangerous, particularly in a situation when there's no calculus by which the insurance commissioner has to base his decisions. But it's now passed, it's now signed by the governor. And again, this is all about anticipated political blame.
This is disgusting. John in the chat says, it sounds like we'll have less choice and higher prices for insurance. Well, I think that's spot on. I think with a bill like this, we'll be lucky if there are any insurance companies left at all. Well, I guess we can assume that the insurance companies that are left will be the ones that are friends with Jeff Landry.
I would assume so, but I can tell you, Danielle, not only will this bill make sure that insurance companies do not come here, I guarantee you insurance companies right now who are in Louisiana are looking very, very closely at this bill that was just signed by the governor, because guess what? They're subject to retroactive penalties, as we talked about earlier, if the insurance commissioner concludes that they were charging too much. Policyholders right now are probably concerned. What if this insurance commissioner concludes that I haven't been paying enough in premiums and he gets to order us to pay more premiums? But anyway, you're right. This is not going to bring insurance companies to Louisiana, and it's certainly not going to be comforting to policyholders either. This is a bad deal for both.
It is, and it takes Tim Temple off of his mission because now he has to go on a PR campaign. At least if I was advising him, that's what I would say he needed to do. You have to go on a PR campaign now and say, I disagree with this, and I will not be exercising the authority that this law has given me. And next session, I commit to leading the charge to get this darn thing repealed.
Yeah.
That's what I would be saying if I was Tim Temple right now. Chris, it bears mentioning who voted against this bill, because I think those are some names that definitely deserve some recognition.
Yeah. Nine Senate Republicans, huh?
Yeah. So Robert Alain, Adam Bass, Rick Edmonds, Mike Facey, Blake Miguez, Robert Owen, Thomas Presley, Alan Seabaugh, and Bill Wheat voted against it. And Valerie Hodges was absent for that vote. And then in the House, there were 34 who voted against it, and I'll just list them quickly. Beryl Amade, Dennis Bamberg, Stephanie Baralt, Chad Boyer, Josh Carlson, Kim Carver, Emily Chenevere, Kim Coates, Ray Cruz, Paula Davis, Jason DeWitt, Kelly Dickerson, Kathy Edmonston, Peter Egan, Gabe Fermet, Barbara Freiberg, Jay Galley, Brett Guyman, Troy Hebert, Chance Henry, Big John Ilg, Jacob Landry. Ed Larvadane joined the Republicans. Danny McCormick, Dixon McMakin, Michael Mellerin, Joe Angeron, Chuck Owen, Rodney Shammerhorn, Philip Tarver, Roger Wilder, Mark Wright, John Weibel, Z. Zarang. My representative, Jessica Doming, was absent for the vote, as was Beth Billings, Francis Thompson, Jeff Wiley.
Yeah. So thank you to all of those Republican reps and senators who were smart enough to see through this and understand what bad public policy this is. And we're going to be, Danielle, we've already posted on our Facebook page, LACAG Facebook page, and our X page, the Republicans who voted for this. And we'll repost those. So I'll make sure everybody knows who voted for it. But to the extent, Danielle, that any of the other insurance legislation may have had some marginal effect on insurance rates in Louisiana and improved our business climate, this bill right here is the death knell to any hope that those bills would have accomplished anything, because it's that important, and it's just that devastating to insurance companies in Louisiana and really to policyholders as well.
Now, Chris, does Governor Landry, through the Constitution, have any recourse to double back on this? Can he say, oh, crap, I've got a lot of flack. The people figured me out. I'm never going to be able to survive this politically if I don't do something. Can he veto something he already signed? Can he repeal something he already signed? What's his recourse if he wants to backtrack?
The only thing that he can do once a law has been signed, it is the law. The only thing that can happen then is he can push the legislature to quickly repeal it in the next session or even in a special session. He could do that.
So if he has a I'm getting myself together special session, and that could be the topic, and he can fix all the things that he broke during this one.
Yes, I'm not holding my breath about that, Danielle, because it seems like the natural tendency of Governor Landry, instead of honestly reflecting on mistakes, which we all make mistakes, we've all sinned and fallen short, but he tends to double down even more and sink more deeply into the quicksand whenever he's criticized about things he's done. I'm not sure that he has the ability of any kind of genuine self-reflection. And in order to be a good leader and in order to grow as a leader and to inspire your citizenry, you have to be able to reflect upon the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that includes you and your decisions. And I have not seen that he has the ability to do that.
Yeah, nor have I. All right. Well, we spent a lot of time on that, but I think it was worth it. I think it was needed. Let's talk this. So the session or the legislature took some time on Sunday. They went in on Sunday, and there was the Bagneris. They used the Bagneris rule. Would you remind our listeners, Chris, about what the Bagneris rule in this? I think it's only in the Senate, right? In the Senate is, and how it's used. Just
Yes,
as a reminder.
sure. The Bagneris rule is a rule in the Senate, and I believe the president of the Senate can call for the Bagneris rule. And the Bagneris rule basically says that anytime a bill is called, any senator can press the object button anonymously, and the bill is automatically removed from the vote, can't be called. So it has to go through the whole cycle again, which is usually the next day. It can be called again. And then if someone objects again under Bagneris, then it can't be called. So that has happened on a couple of bills in the Senate, and that we can get into, but that's basically what it is.
And the purpose is just to be able to get through the non-controversial bills as quickly as possible. That was kind of the premise of the Bagneris rule when it was instituted. I believe maybe anyone can make a motion to institute Bagneris. I'm not sure if that's
Okay,
true.
that may be right, and that is the stated purpose of it, Danielle. The stated purpose of it is so that non-controversial bills can be disposed of, but often the real purpose is that a senator is opposed to a piece of legislation and just doesn't want it to get voted on, and that is a legitimate procedural mechanism to block a vote on bad legislation.
Yeah, rules work both ways, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so on Sunday there were a couple bills that got voted on the House and Senate floor. Senate Bill 46 by Senator Facey, my senator. His bill to ban geoengineering and weather modification hit the House floor, and it passed 58-33 with but 12 Republicans voted against it. Maybe I can just mention quickly who those Republicans were that voted against it. They were Beth Billings, DeWitt Carrier, Paula Davis, Daryl Desautels, Brian Fontenot, Barbara Freiberg, Troy Hebert, Stephanie Hilferty, Jeremy Lacombe. Let's see here. A bunch of Democrats. Dixon McMakin, Vinnie St. Blanc, Joe Stagney, and I think that's it. And then there were a couple absent. They were Larry Bagley, Jacob Broad, Vincent Cox, the speaker, Michael Eccles, and Joe Angeron, and Philip Tarver.
Yeah. So these Republicans that you just named, Danielle, voted against legislation that simply bans the process of dumping toxic chemicals out of the back of planes in order to manipulate and control the weather and try to block the sun. Think about the utter insanity of this. And these chemicals fall on us, on our children, and our soil, and our food, affect our health. And these Republicans could not bring themselves to support legislation banning this horrendous practice.
You know, I didn't watch the the debate on this one. I watched the debate on Kim Coates's similar bill, and I was so disgusted. Chris, you went away for a second. Okay. I was so disgusted by the tone of the legislators as they were questioning her. I was disgusted by the premise of one of the legislators, and I'll save that for later. I'll save it for when we talk about her bill. But all that to say, yes, they even if they don't necessarily believe this is happening, why would you vote against it?
Orgeron went up onto the well, Representative Orgeron, and said, "I'm very neutral on this bill." And then he proceeded to talk about the problems that he had with it, one of which we have to make a distinction between garden variety geoengineering and cloud seeding. Cloud seeding. Well, the response is, why do we need cloud seeding in order to try to control the weather or block the sun? Whatever they're doing to try to manipulate the weather is sinister and evil, and it should be banned, especially when it involves, as I said, dumping these chemicals out of planes. We don't even know who these people are. We know for a fact that this is occurring in Louisiana skies, yet nobody has registered for a permit to do it. None. So we don't even know who the people are. And I'm just absolutely disgusted by that. I'm very happy that Senator Facey's bill passed, but I'm disgusted with the fact that that 12 Republicans would vote against it.
Yeah. Well, and now it's headed to the governor, and that's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to sign it either. So we do have a call to action up on the LACAG website encouraging the governor to sign the bill today.
Senator Facey said, and we've worked very hard on this. Senator Facey said yesterday that please encourage the governor to sign SB 46 now. Now. And I don't think there's any reason to wait, Danielle. If Governor Landry can sign HB 148, that
right.
basically turns our insurance commissioner into an unaccountable czar, then he can certainly sign a bill very quickly that protects Louisiana citizens from dangerous toxic chemicals. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. I just looked it up, and the status of the bill is that it's been enrolled. So I imagine that the next step is for it to get sent to the governor, and then so all that to say, there may be a day or two before it gets to his desk. So please do the call to action, load up his inbox so that he knows that there is great support for this, and he can't afford to
Yeah,
blow it.
it's lacag.org Action Center. And it's so important that you reach out to the governor and tell him to sign SB 46.
Yeah. All right.
The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of people are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, help balance the body's pH, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. I've heard firsthand testimonials from droppers in their 20s to droppers in their 80s who say that the Slender Eyes drops have completely revolutionized their lives. Try the drops today to see the results for yourself. To learn more about the Slender Eyes drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at info@freedomstate.us and put drops in the subject line, or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. We also have links to those in the show notes. Thank you for supporting the State of Freedom.
Next up, SB 100 by Senator Blake Miguez. This is a bill about accounting and reporting to the legislature any monies that have been spent, I believe, Chris, by the state on illegal immigrants.
Yes, this calls for an itemized accounting and report to the legislature by any public agency about what public benefits are going to illegal immigrants, people who are here illegally. It doesn't call for punitive damage sanctions. It doesn't call for any specific action other than reporting an itemized statement and explanation of the money that's going from public agencies to illegal immigrants in Louisiana. And it's very good. It's basically a taxpayer transparency bill, and Senator Miguez brought it so that the citizens of Louisiana can know how their tax dollars are being spent.
Yeah, it was passed by a vote of 25-11 in the Senate on a party line vote. So I guess it's headed over to the House now.
Yeah. Even the rhinos could not bring themselves to vote against a bill just to let the public know how much of their tax money is going to people who shouldn't be in the country.
Yeah, and there is a complementary bill, Chris, that we've talked about before. I can't remember who's bringing it, that
I think it's Chance Henry, maybe.
mandates maybe so that, and it may be in the list for now, but that mandates reporting of any applications for or inquiries for public assistance by
That's right.
illegal immigrants. Yeah. Okay, next up, SB 80. We talked about this on Thursday, Chris, by Senator Greg Miller. This is a bill that allows the Secretary of State to censor the voice of the people, to basically ban citizens from exit polling and finding out what really happened at their polling site. It passed in concurrence, although there were some people who were opposed to it in the Senate. They were Edmonds, Facey, Hodges, and Miguez, and Senator Seabaugh was absent for that concurrence vote. But the five of them voted against it in the first place, if I recall.
Exactly. On the original final vote, Senator Seabaugh was among the 4 or 5 Republicans who voted against this bill, and hats off to them. Say who they are one more time, Danielle, so our listeners can know the good Republicans who voted against this horrendous bill. Then I'll tell them about the bill.
Okay, in the Senate, it was Rick Edmonds, Mike Facey, Valerie Hodges, Blake Miguez, and Alan Seabaugh.
Yeah. And again, we have the list of the Republicans who voted for and against up on our social media, LACAG, Facebook, and X. Danielle, this is probably the most, among the top 2 or 3 most disturbing pieces of legislation of the session. This is the government coming in and telling CNN that you are free to come into Louisiana, eat our food, drive on our roads, and go into a polling precinct and conduct whatever kind of exit poll you want, and then hop on a plane and get out of here again and use that information that you've derived in our state for whatever purpose you want. You're free to do that because you're CNN. You're a bona fide news gathering organization. So you're free to do it. You have the constitutional right of free speech and association. But ordinary Louisiana citizens who've been living here their whole lives, whose families have been here for generations, who've been paying taxes here their whole lives, who put their kids through school here, who followed the law here, who've contributed to the community here, they don't have the constitutional right to conduct a lawful exit poll at a voting precinct. Think about that. So the government is picking and choosing who gets constitutional protection of core rights and who doesn't. And you know who's behind this bill? Nancy Landry, the Secretary of State. And it's not because she's concerned about disruption at the polling precincts or that things are not going to go smoothly. She's concerned about the fact that citizen exit polls are going to accumulate raw data about how people really voted at one or more precincts and compare that data to what these computers are showing with regard to election results. She's scared of that. Deep down inside, I'm sure she knows these computer-based voting systems are vulnerable, can be hacked, votes can be switched. That's what she's afraid of. And for her to use and scapegoat 65 and 70-year-old women up in Shreveport, the most law-abiding people you'll ever know, who simply were conducting an exit poll and doing a paper ballot demonstration at a polling precinct, and basically call them criminals, that she could have had them arrested. But instead, I'm coming to the legislature to do legislation to protect our voters from harassment at the voting precincts and at the voting booths. What an absolute joke. And we have Governor Landry has a responsibility to the citizens of Louisiana to veto this bill. There's no question about it. We have a call to action up on it demanding that he veto this. There's also a phone number that's on the call to action. He needs to veto this bill. There's no question. If Governor Landry wants to, right now, Governor Landry, with regard to his conservative base in Louisiana, Danielle, is about 2/3 sunk in quicksand. If he wants to go down the final third under the quicksand, he should sign this legislation into law, because this will be the acid test of whether or not he really does believe in the Constitution, whether or not he really does embrace the principles that he ran on, which is to protect Louisiana citizens from this type of arbitrary government overreach. And this will basically make a liar out of him if he doesn't veto this bill. If he does, then he's got a faint hope of reviving his credibility with his base.
Yeah. And just a point on that, Chris. His 2/3 sunk in quicksand is before the people understand what he's done to our insurance situation.
Well, if that could do the job in and of itself. Yeah, that could do the job. House Bill 148, the insurance commissioner czar, unaccountable czar bill. Yeah, you're right, Danielle. There's a lot to choose from here, but I mean, SB 80 was brought by a Republican who's been carrying Greg Miller, who's been carrying Nancy Landry's water the whole session.
Yep.
And, it received very little debate or pushback. I will give Representative Cruz a lot of credit, because on the House floor, he truly exposed Beth Billings, who carried this garbage bill on the House side, and really exposed this bill for what it really is. So Representative Cruz, at some point, I'm going to clip that exchange. In fact, somebody may already have. Representative Cruz and others exposed this for what it really is on the floor.
Awesome. Well, if Governor Landry does in fact sign this, I will, continue my drumbeat of putting out an all points bulletin to the constitutional attorneys who are in our listenership, our viewership, and within arm's reach of our viewership, because this needs to be immediately challenged. I would also say that if Governor Landry signs this, I would encourage those sweet ladies up in Shreveport that were targeted so unfairly, so wrongly by Secretary Landry to immediately apply for the right to exit poll. And so we have a foothold for a lawsuit.
Exactly. You know what, Danielle? That is so important. You're exactly right. Because right now, it would be, if he signs it, it would be just a general prohibition. In order to have what's called a judicially recognizable injury, these ladies would have to apply and be denied. And then they could allege an individualized deprivation of their constitutional rights. That is such a great point you make, Danielle.
Yeah. And I guess I shouldn't single out the ladies in Shreveport, although I would love for them to do it. As many citizens across the state should absolutely go and apply to be able to exit poll, because we could hit this on a lot of fronts.
Yeah. This is not just a theoretical issue. So if you're sitting here saying, why do I care? I don't do exit polls. The reason why you should care is that, first of all, it involves a violation of fundamental constitutional rights. And if the government can do it in this case, guess what? Sooner or later, the government czar is going to be knocking at your door. So don't wait for that to happen. And secondly, it has to do with making sure that our election system is secure. And these citizen exit polls are important for that purpose.
Yeah. And I would love for not only this law to get challenged through a suit against the Secretary of State's office, but I would like the very premise that people need to apply to be able to conduct exit polls to be challenged in a suit, in the same suit as well, Chris, because that in and of itself is unconstitutional.
Yeah, you look at other states, Danielle, Texas and other places. They don't make these arbitrary distinctions between bona fide news organizations like CNN and ordinary citizens. Everybody has to abide by the same rules. Everybody has to obey the law, and everybody can conduct exit polls as long as they're done in a non-disruptive way. And that's the way it should be here.
Yeah, there are rules set out that are prescribed conduct rules for how to operate in an election polling zone. Other than that, no one should have to apply for a permit to conduct an exit poll. No one should have to be validated by their journalistic credentials, according to the Secretary of State, either.
Exactly. And you know what adds insult to injury on it, Danielle, is the fact that CNN and MSNBC are considered more credible in the state of Louisiana by our Secretary of State than ordinary law-abiding Louisiana citizens. That is an absolute insult, particularly in a day and age when the overwhelming majority of Louisiana citizens, they would trust the devil himself before they trust anything that CNN or MSNBC do.
Well, I'm not too impressed with the two Landrys up at the top these days. All right, Chris, let's talk about SB 8 by Senator Jay Morris. This one was brought to House Civil Law yesterday. It passed with some amendments, 12-0 though. And this is his bill that would be, or I guess it's a proposed constitutional amendment. So should it get all the way through, it would hit the ballot sometime in the future. I don't know when. And the people would have the right to say whether they want to make it easier to fire or reclassify employees, public employees.
Yeah, and it basically would give the legislature the authority to move certain categories of classified civil servants now who are
Unfireable.
basically unfireable, really, unless it's done by the Louisiana Public Service Commission, which is corrupt and dysfunctional, as a number of officials have said. But it would allow the legislature to do that, to move these classified civil servants to non-classified categories so that they could be held more accountable for doing a good job.
Yeah. So it's a positive move that this is moving along. And next stop will be the House floor. And that will be the end of the road until it would come to us. All right. A couple things hit the House floor yesterday. And the first one is a pretty interesting one, Chris, and a little bit of a head scratcher. But I'm happy with the way it did ultimately turn out. This is House Bill 76 by Democratic Representative Pat Moore. It creates the crime of the felony crime of intentional infection of a sexually transmitted disease. It seems like, Chris, that would be a no-brainer. It seems like if a DA, as we were talking about last night, if a DA can prove that someone intentionally infected someone with an incurable sexually transmitted disease, that would be something that everyone could agree is horrible. But that's not the case. Are you
It really was unbelievable, Danielle. I watched the debate on the House floor. We have a call to action on this, a number of communications that have gone to legislators, and that's exactly what it does. It's a Democrat, Representative Pat Moore, that in the bill creates the felony crime of knowing that you have an incurable sexually transmitted disease and infecting a partner with that incurable disease with the specific intent to do so. It should be a felony crime in Louisiana. That's the bill. It passed overwhelmingly on the House floor, but four Republicans voted against this. I'm like, what in the world are you smoking in there?
Yeah, these it's absolutely astounding how people can argue in favor of something like this. It passed 68-18 overall, with the majority, like you said, with Representative Moore. But let me call out the Republicans who voted against it, because I feel like this is a real character test, Chris. I mean, it's hard to describe it any other way. If you're okay with someone intentionally infecting someone with a sexually transmitted disease, you deserve to have your name called out and your character called into question. And that's what I'm doing right now. DeWitt Carrier, Barbara Freiberg, Wayne McMahon, and Nicholas Muscarello and Joe Stagney all believe that you should be able to intentionally infect someone with a sexually transmitted disease and it not be a crime.
And some of the objections that were being raised were, well, how do you prove this? And how do you know false accusations won't be made? And so what's going on? And I felt like saying, and I was saying to myself, guess what? That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to criminalize criminal behavior. The responsibility of proving it and honoring the presumption of innocence and proof beyond reasonable doubt is up to the DAs and the executive branch of government. Your responsibility is to make law. Your responsibility is not to go and prosecute criminal cases. There's no way, as a matter of principle, that any Republican legislator should be opposing legislation to criminalize this type of absolute demonic behavior. And it is important that our listeners know the Republicans who voted against this.
Yeah. And I'll just go ahead and say that we will be scoring people, definitely including this bill. I mean, there will be a lot of other bills that these reps and senators get scored on, but this, for crying out loud, is among them.
100%. And again, I'm glad that we are supporting this bill, that we have calls to action up on this, and this needs to get through and be signed.
Chris, I'll tell you what, I'm not giving anyone any extra points for voting for it, but I am subtracting points for those who voted against it.
100%. You deserve no extra credit points, Republicans, for voting for this legislation. But
Right.
the ones who didn't certainly deserve a mention.
That's right. Okay. Next up, House Bill 608 by Representative Kim Coates. We touched on this briefly when we were talking about Senator Facey's similar bill. This is her Louisiana Atmospheric Protection Act, would also ban geoengineering and weather modification. It failed on the House floor 20-69, Chris. This was, first of all, sometimes I think our legislators are very uneducated about the realities of the world we live in. Sometimes I think our legislators are just uneducated generally. I mean, I heard some of the dumbest, most ridiculous questions asked of Representative Coates that I could even possibly imagine. One representative, I'm not going to say who it is because I can't quite remember and I don't want to call someone stupid and it be something else, someone else, but was literally badgering her about the fact that plants put off chemical immersion, I don't know, dispersion into the atmosphere. And she was saying, so you're not upset about the fact that plants emit chemicals into the atmosphere, but you are upset about the fact that they're dumping toxic chemicals on us as people? What about climate change? That was a literal discussion, Chris,
Yeah.
on the House floor. I was like, I don't think if I ran into a wall, it would make me dumber than that comment.
That was Representative Marcel. And, Representative Coates, I believe the response should have been, Representative Marcel, the plants that you're talking about, the oil refineries, the things that produce things that make our economy.
No. She was talking about green plants. She's talking about trees, Chris.
Wait, I
I
thought she
think
was.
maybe
Wait a
she
minute.
was
Are you
talking
sure?
about plants. That would make it slightly less stupid. That would make it less stupid. I literally thought she was talking about flowers and trees.
I may be misinterpreting it, and we might have to seek some clarification on that. But
Yeah,
I
let's do that.
interpreted that as like chemical plants, oil refineries.
I really hope you're right, Chris. I
But
really
the
hope you're
bottom
right.
line is it's only slightly less illegitimate to say that, because guess what, Representative Marcel, you were able to drive to the Capitol this morning instead of walk because of those plants that produce oil and refine oil. You're able to brush your teeth. Everything you touch is derived in some way or another from oil. You're going to compare the public utility that is derived from these plants to dumping toxic chemicals on Louisiana citizens and our soil and our food on our children in order to block the sun and control the weather? You really are making that comparison? Of course, in an ideal world, we wouldn't want any kind of pollution. But to make that comparison is just obscene. It's unbelievable.
Well, and guess what? Those plants are regulated, right? There are measurements, there are licenses. And look, I saw something on Dustin Granger put something out yesterday who said that there was a company that, or a plant that was dumping all kinds of toxic chemicals into, I don't know if it was a waterway or something. Of course, that's horrible. Of course, we are not promoting that in any way, but we're saying there is a path. There are guardrails for these companies, and they are that allow us to hold them accountable. And clearly, if they were dumping toxic chemicals into the water or the soil, that is something that we have recourse for. But if there's no paper trail, we don't even know who is dumping this stuff out of the sky, what their intentions are toward the people, what the long-term effects of these chemicals are. I think we deserve to have some guardrails for that.
Absolutely. And it is just, to me, unbelievable that on a bill that would provide real protection to citizens from this activity, that it would be defeated. Do you know why, Danielle? I believe it was defeated, according to a couple of legislators who voted against it or
Tell
voted
me.
for it. Because Lobby, Louisiana Association of
That's right.
Businesses and Industry, and one other powerful company put in floor notes against it, basically saying that it would disrupt their business activities and all kinds of things. But guess what? Kim Coates confirmed that the stuff to which they objected had all been amended out of the bill by the time it was voted on. It was
Yeah.
all gone. The bill simply said at the end that geoengineering, aka chemtrails in Louisiana, which is the process of dumping this garbage out of planes, it's prohibited in Louisiana when the purpose is to control or manipulate the weather, to block the sun, to change the climate, that sort of thing. That's what the bill specifically and only prohibited, and it was defeated on the House floor
Yeah.
overwhelmingly because
Yeah.
of opposition from Lobby, that is supposed to be a business organization that protects the best interests of ordinary Louisiana citizens.
Well, it's at least meant to protect the interest of the business community. It's not protecting the interest of ordinary Louisiana citizens. And if you go onto Lobby's website, you can look and see there's quite a number of chemical companies that sit on their board of directors.
And Air Products, I believe, the company that is knee deep in the carbon capture sequestration racket and
Yeah,
projects.
yeah, absolutely. All right, next up, we'll take a turn for some positive news here. Senate
But
Bill
do you need to
14.
say, did you mention the Republicans who voted for the chemtrail bill
No, let
608?
me do no, thank you for that. Let me do that. And I'm still giggling over the fact that I thought she was talking about literal plants. You're probably, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it was not as stupid as I thought it was, but it's still kind of dumb. All right, all right.
You can never, you
That's right. You really can't. You really can't. Okay, in favor of this bill were Beryl Amade. I'll list everybody who was in favor of the bill, Chris, because there's 20 of them. Democrat Marcus Bryant, Rhonda Butler, Robbie Carter, also a Democrat, Kim Landry, Jason DeWitt, Kelly Dickerson, Kathy Edmonston, Peter Egan, Gabe Firmit, Jay Galley, Brett Guyman, Dodie Horton, Jacob Landry, Shane Mack, Danny McCormick, Chuck Owen, Neil Reiser, Rodney Shammerhorn, Philip Tarver. I'll just mention that the entire Bayou delegation is missing from this, and most of them did vote for Mike Facey's bill, probably because he is their senator. So we have to be thankful that Big Mike is bringing some controversial bills, because that may be the only way to get the Bayou delegation to vote for them.
absolutely. And I'm glad we do have Mike Facey's SB 80. You could argue that in terms of the language and some of the penalties and that sort of thing, it's not as strong a bill as HB 608, but it is something, and it is I think significant.
Yeah, his one is his chemtrails one is SB 46, I believe, Chris.
SB 46, right?
Okay, and the other thing I want to mention while we're talking about Senator Facey is that I know we discussed, Chris, before, that his fluoride bill failed, but there is an effort underway to get it revived and heard directly on the House floor. And you have a call to action on LACAG's website for that?
Yeah, we're trying to get the House to convene and vote to hear that on the House floor, because it's such an important issue, such an important bill. The fluoride in our water, in our public water systems, without our consent, harming us, harming our children. So that's a good bill by Senator Facey, and I'd like to see it at the governor's desk.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get it revived, that's for sure. Do you think there's enough, I guess, is there enough legislator support to even get it reheard?
I'd say it's 50.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, next up, like I said, we'll try and bring some good news too. Senator Mcmath's SB 14, his Make Louisiana Healthy Again bill that would get a lot of the processed garbage out of kids' school lunches, school meals, passed the House unanimously. and it's headed to the Senate for concurrence for probably just a couple minor amendments that were made along the way, but we expect this to get signed by the governor soon.
Yeah, we testified in favor of this legislation and supported it. It's very, very important, Danielle, with the obesity epidemic and chronic obesity epidemic, I should say, and diseases in Louisiana, chronic illnesses that young children have. To give them healthy food to eat when they're eating 2 meals a day at their school and get the junk out of their diet and out of their system. I think it's very important, and I think it will lead to not only greater physical health, I think it'll lead to mental health and also greater long-term productivity. So much of what we do, how we feel is based on what we consume, and we have to remember that. I think it's a really good bill.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, next up, House Bill 304 by Representative Robbie Carter. This is the bill that is about expropriation for carbon capture, and it's just about who gets to set where the venue gets set if there's any kind of dispute, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. All it says, and it is important, all it says is that any company that brings an action to try to seize private property for any kind of carbon capture sequestration project, that action has to be brought in the parish where the property is located. It passed substantially, Danielle, but there were several Republicans who voted against HB 304.
Yeah.
And
I'll
I'm like, I can find it, but
No, I
I'm
have
sitting
it.
here thinking, yeah, why would a Republican vote against a bill simply to make it marginally less stressful, marginally less distressing for a property owner when he's getting sued so someone can seize his property? At least you have to bring the action in the parish where the property is located so he's not inconvenienced even more. And there were Republicans who voted against this.
Yeah, I'll mention them, Chris. They are Adam Bass, Rick Edmonds, Mike Facey, Caleb Klein, Peter Brock Myers, Thomas Presley, Alan Seabaugh, Larry Selders. Is he a Republican? I think
No,
he's a
Larry
Democrat.
Selders is a Democrat.
And Jeremy Stein, and also Bob Hinskins was absent for the vote. So none of those folks have your back when it comes to you going to court if somebody's trying to take your property for carbon capture.
Yeah, it's disappointing because a number of those names that you mentioned are typically much more reliable than that. It's
Yeah,
amazing how, when it comes to carbon capture sequestration in this state, so many Republicans simply are not willing to provide any deference whatsoever to the core right of private properties or to the convenience of landowners. It's extraordinary.
it is. Chris, maybe we'll need to get Carla Lims back. I know she and her running mate are in DC this week. They were hoping to meet with some senators to get the Q45 tax credit stripped out of the big, beautiful bill. I don't know what happened with that. I did see some blip on the TV the other night, yesterday, I think, but it may have been the day before, saying that Trump was taking out a lot of funding for green new scam stuff. So I'm very hopeful that the tap dries up on this nonsense, because we're having a heck of a time trying to shut the valve off from here.
Yeah. And it's amazing. If the money dries up, Danielle, watch how quickly, if our money dries up, propping this up, watch how quickly it all goes away, which will just demonstrate for all to see what we already know, that this is not a self sustaining, profitable enterprise in the private enterprise system at all. It will collapse like a cheap suit the moment our money is not propping it up anymore. And I hope that that is the case. And you're right about President Trump. And I hope that he has the insights and the wisdom to understand what this is really all about.
Yeah, I think he does, since he coined it the green new scam. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure he's clocked it. All right, next up, House Bill 309 by Representative Philip Tarver. This isn't one that we talked about before, but we were watching the House debate, the House floor debate yesterday, and I thought it bore mention. Representative Tarver brought a bill that would strip out any funding to NGOs from general appropriations, and it would have its own set of its own process or its own category for appropriation. So when we're looking to see where the government is putting our tax dollars to support these non-governmental organizations, which you would think the name would lend itself enough for people to not want us to be putting money into these organizations because they're not core government functions. Maybe we should rename them non-core government function into
Right, exactly.
organizations, Chris, because the debate on this was so ridiculous. It's like, yeah, okay, so maybe they could potentially be helpful in communities, but they don't exist to serve the people as a government agency. So the government should not be funding them. Anyway, I think this is a great bill brought by Representative Tarver because it's a transparency bill, so we can see in a much more straightforward way what all organizations are receiving tax dollars to operate.
Yeah. And so basically, what he's doing is separating the appropriations process with regard to money that goes directly to public agencies and money that goes to NGOs, either potentially directly or even through a public agency once they've received money. Because you're right, Danielle, it's very difficult to know or to see the difference if it's all appropriated in one big bulk appropriations bill. And so I think it's important to make that distinction. That way, we'll really know how much of our money is going to public agencies and how much of it is being funneled to these NGOs, some of which I can assure you are doing absolutely nothing to serve humanity, nothing to serve Louisiana citizens, but an awful lot to serve themselves.
That's right. 4 Democrats joined the Republicans. This passed on almost a party line vote. So I want to mention those Democrats and give them credit for this. They are Chad Brown, Steve Jackson, Pat Moore, and Robbie Carter.
Very, very thankful for those 4 Democrats.
Yeah. Next up, House Bill 519 by Representative Brian Glorioso. This is the cockroach bill, and they finally got that cockroach across the finish line, which is disgusting to me, Chris. I honestly feel like we may have more losses under this Republican administration with a Republican supermajority than we did when we had John Bell Edwards and even more rhinos, self-proclaimed rhinos, basically 2 years ago. I'm so disgusted by this legislature. I can barely stand myself. And I know, look, y'all, I'm so sorry that I'm so salty this morning. I tend to try and be encouraging. I want to be the sunny one. I want to be the silver lining one. But this just makes me so livid.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. In fact, Danielle, there was a comment on our one of our social media platforms last night just to that effect. He said, "We fought this back under Democrat administrations, and yet it's passed and will likely be signed under a Republican governor and a Republican dominated legislature." It's just, who would have thought that? Who would have thought that we would have successfully kept this from getting through under John Bell Edwards, but not successful in keeping it from getting through under a Republican governor? It is just extraordinary. And it is unbelievable. It's unbelievable that people actually believe that this is going to accomplish its purported objectives, which is to reduce insurance rates and reduce traffic accidents. It's going to do neither one of those two things. The only thing it's going to do, Danielle, is create an opportunity for further encroachments on liberty, and it's going to cause the transfer of even more of our money to the government. Yeah. Which is exactly what it's really designed to do: raise money for the government. That's what it's going to do. It's not about public safety. So it's extraordinary, but I can't stand this bill. I can't stand it, especially because they're not being honest about why they're bringing it. So now, in your vehicle, no phone to your ear to talk on the phone, or you run the risk of being pulled over, issued a ticket, criminalized for that activity. Meanwhile, we have a legislature that can't bring themselves to ban an activity by people we don't know, but we know it's absolutely going on, that's dropping these fatal chemicals on us out of airplanes in order to control the weather and block the sun. They can't stand up and ban that, but they can ban law-abiding citizens from talking on a phone in their vehicle. Think about that.
Yeah, and they can ban law-abiding citizens from exercising their free speech at their polling place. And they're giving Nancy Landry all the runway she needs to go ahead and buy those machines. This is absolutely a disgrace, and it's a huge betrayal of the people of this state.
It's unbelievable. And it all comes down to special interests and lobbyists, powerful special interests against the vast bulk of ordinary Louisiana citizens. It's all traceable to those two issues. And unfortunately, too often this session, our Republican legislators have chosen to stand against the citizens of Louisiana and to hop in bed with the big, powerful, corrupt special interest groups. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, and do the bidding of the governor.
And do the bidding of the governor. And
okay.
Yeah. And by the way, Danielle, I've heard on very good authority that Governor Landry, because I said, why did you vote for this? Why did you vote for the cell phone bill? And a couple of them have said the governor is pushing hard on this cell phone bill. I wish the governor would push just as hard on making sure that people's constitutional rights are protected and their free speech rights, and that we're not getting poisoned by chemicals being dumped out of planes, and that we go in that we understand how vulnerable computer-based voting is. I wish he would speak up on issues like that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? A lot of people voted for the perception we had of Governor Landry or Jeff Landry as Attorney General because we believed he was fighting for the people. We believed he was fighting for free speech. We believed he was fighting against the mandates. And I don't know what happened to that guy. I don't know if that really was just a facade to set him up for a run for governor. Perhaps that's all it was, but it's absolutely despicable.
He was one of the lead attorneys general in the case against the Biden administration that exposed this collusion between the Biden administration and big tech to crush free speech online. He exposed that. That was one of the reasons why he was hailed as a great conservative and someone who would be a great governor. He exposed censorship on the federal level, which means that if he doesn't veto SB 80, the bill banning citizens from doing exit polls, I'm going to come to the conclusion that all that he did as Attorney General to expose the censorship of our speech was political posturing to position himself to run for governor, and that it wasn't really a philosophical conviction that he has.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris. And if you're on social media, you see every time illegal immigrants get arrested or something good happens, people go on there and they say, this is what I voted for, meaning this is why I voted for Trump, because he's doing what he said he would do. I voted for X, Y, or Z of what his platform was. He made a promise and he's following through. And I think right now, Louisiana citizens, if Governor Landry wants to understand where the people stand, the people voted for the Jeff Landry that went toe-to-toe with the Biden administration at the height of tyranny. They did not vote for this crap.
Exactly. And the people voted for the Jeff Landry who challenged John Bel Edwards' perpetual lockdown orders and tried to stand up as Attorney General for the citizens of Louisiana. That's the Jeff Landry we voted for. That's the Jeff Landry I voted for.
Me
and
too.
I don't know whether he has a doppelganger. He might, because I certainly see very little resemblance to Attorney General Jeff Landry and Governor Jeff Landry.
All right. Well, did I mention, Chris? I did not mention who voted against this. Let me see.
Yeah, I think we need to mention them favorably.
Yeah. Okay. So the 4 Republicans who voted against it were Franklin Foyle. This is in the Senate. Senator Valerie Hodges, Blake Miguez, and Alan Seabaugh. 1 Democrat voted against it, and that was Sam Jenkins.
Sam Jenkins. And again, this is the bill. They voted against this bill to ban handheld cell phone use, essentially criminalize it in your car. So hats off to those Republicans for doing the right thing.
Yeah. Okay, next up, House Bill 577 by Representative Darrell Desautels. This is his bill to give Nancy Landry the ability to choose whoever she wants to get those voting computers here. And of course, the legislature just bowed down and did her bidding once again. It passed the Senate 33-1.
33-1.
Valerie Hodges was the lone senator to stand up against this, and Senator Miguez was absent for that vote, Chris.
And Senator Valerie Hodges has said this is just a bad piece of legislation. What this does, Danielle, right now in Louisiana, for all major investments of taxpayer money, in this case in computer voting system that Nancy Landry wants, it requires what's called a competitive open bidding process, where all potential companies and vendors get to vie for the contract on an equal level, equal playing field. That's called request for proposal, a competitive bidding process. They all submit, she submits a request for proposal to all interested vendors, and then they sell their products. Okay, they submit a bid. Okay, that's what's going on now. This bill changes that and gives Secretary of Landry the option to negotiate through what's called an invitation to negotiate, whereby she can issue that invitation to negotiate to as few as one vendor if she wants to, and negotiate and contract with that vendor and issue the contract to that vendor. And I think the reason why she's pushing this so hard, Danielle, is because twice before, when Cal Ardoin was Secretary of State and Nancy Landry was First Assistant Secretary of State, Cal Ardoin tried to issue a contract to the voting system contract to Dominion Voting System. And it was complained, there was a complaint filed by other competitive vendors, and saying it wasn't fair, this is not competitive. He rigged this bid. And guess what? The Office of State Procurement agreed with them and said that's exactly what happened here. This bid, this request for proposal, is written in such a way that only Dominion Voting Systems can satisfy it. And so he would have awarded the contract to them on that basis. So it was thrown out when he tried to do that, not once, but not twice. And at least on one of those occasions, Nancy Landry was the First Assistant Secretary of State. So is there a possibility that through this new mechanism of contract negotiation, maybe she's trying to get around the possibility of being criticized or having a complaint because the law will allow her to negotiate with only one vendor of her choosing and make the unilateral decision to award the contract to that vendor? That may be what's going on here. She may be already have her mind made up about who she wants to go with on this, and she's simply going to try to streamline that process as much as possible without getting it hung up by any complaints that would otherwise be filed by aggrieved vendors who don't get this contract. That is probably what's going on here. But why would you do this? Why would you make the process less competitive and create the perception of some kind of political shenanigans or political corruption or political games in light of the history of this process that I just went over, where the public is already skeptical about the fairness of the process? Why would you vest more power in the Secretary of State, less competition in the process, and give her the authority to go with whatever vendor she wants? That's why it's a bad bill. But not a murmur of debate or protest on the Senate floor about this. Fortunately, Senator Valerie Hodges voted against it, but it's still a very bad bill.
And Chris, the only thing that we can point to really is that Nancy Landry controls who gets elected.
I mean, I don't understand why the legislators pay such homage to her.
That has
It's
to
only
be
one
why.
of two. Well, maybe it's only one of two reasons. Either they think, who cares? She's a glorified clerk. All she does is process election returns.
Maybe.
So we're not worried about her. So she can do whatever she wants. Either that's it, or just the opposite, where they're thinking she does have great power. She controls the levers of elections in Louisiana, and we don't want to do or say anything to get on her bad side for sure. So I don't know what the reason is, but for whatever reason, there is literally no legislative oversight over her agenda. None.
Yeah. And Chris, if this wasn't the case, you would at least expect that the Democrats would vote against it just because it's something that a Republican Secretary of State wants.
You would think so. You would absolutely think so, but it doesn't make the bill any less horrendous. You know what? I'm thankful. I'm thankful to Senator Valerie Hodges.
That's right.
For recognizing it and saying, this is bad, and voting against it. God bless Senator Valerie Hodges.
Chris, what happens when the legislature passes a law that is contrary to another law? Like, what happens when they create contradictory laws? Like, I'm sure there are some very strong directives around how procurement must take place Does this just it overwrites what it is existing with regard to voting machines, or is it something else?
Well, first of all, this bill does not change what the law is regarding what kind of a system we will have to have generally. This just creates an opportunity for the Secretary of State to negotiate with only one of those vendors for whatever political reason she may have, when there may be others that offer essentially the same things and maybe even offer it better. So,
But I guess what I'm asking is, when it comes to procurement broadly for the state, not specifically, and this bill is passed, and say this bill contradicts the general approach we have for overall procurement, it just overwrites our procurement approach for this particular sector? Or can there be some kind of legal challenge on the basis that these two laws are contradictory, and how do we know which law to follow?
well, you'll notice that the laws will say notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, or it will say that it is expressly repealing another statute. And so it generally says one of those two things. And if it doesn't say one of those two things, the law that would prevail would be the most recently passed. The
Okay.
most recently passed legislation would, by implication, repeal anything that conflicts with it that was in previous law.
Okay. Thanks. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals, or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Okay, next up, House Bill 590 by Representative Annie Spell. This bill is her companion to Senator Sebaugh's bill to ban foreign funding for elections and election campaigns. It was meant to be heard yesterday, but it's still subject to call. Did they? Well, it's not. It's in the House, right? Or is it in the Senate, Chris? I'm sorry.
It's on the. I believe that I believe it's in the Senate.
Okay. Okay, so it may have hit the Bagneris rule then.
I believe it's in the Senate, and I believe it was objected to, and so it wasn't called HB 590. I don't know why any Republican would object to a bill that simply, statutorily prohibits foreign countries and foreigners and people who are illegal in the United States or otherwise not U.S. citizens to be able to donate to our elections,
Well,
to candidates.
you don't know why, Chris? You don't know
I
why?
mean,
Because
no, of course not. I can't imagine.
I'll tell you, it's amazing that closing this loophole would close off a lot of opportunities to get their mortgages paid and to get their Mardi Gras crew dues paid for. Didn't they pass some legislation that would allow them to use campaign funds for all kinds of personal things?
I believe it's close. Yeah, that's Mark Wright's omnibus override of the Louisiana campaign finance laws and ethics laws. Yeah,
well, we wouldn't want to shut off any opportunities to get that stuff paid for.
Of course not. Of course not. You can't do that.
These
that would
freaking crooks, Chris.
That
I
would
can't
be
even stand it.
That would be cruel and unusual punishment to allow that, Danielle. Come on. You know better than this. But the point is, it's a good bill. HB 590 is a very good bill, and there should be and it should be banned. But anyway, it hasn't passed the Senate floor yet.
We'll see what happens. All right. I'm more and more skeptical of these people with every passing minute. Okay, Chris, let's see what else is on my list for today. Okay, y'all, I am maybe not the sunshine girl I usually am today. I'm just so irritated by most of what's happening. But House and Governmental Affairs is meeting today, 9:30, 4 minutes. And Dixon McMakin is bringing House Bill 586, and he is calling for a constitutional convention. I will say, Chris, this is my observation. Representative Mcma seems to sure be carrying a lot for the governor right now. A lot of his bills look like they have the governor's fingerprints all over them. I will say that I am strongly opposed to a constitutional convention in this environment. Do I think that our Constitution deserves an overhaul? Absolutely. I think it's too big. I think that it covers too many topics that are not germane for a Constitution. However, I trust these people to touch the Constitution that we have? No, not one tiny little bit. That's
Yeah.
my perspective.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I tend to agree with you. I think it is going to depend on how the delegates are chosen, who the delegates are, because the last thing we want is to have a situation where the government is using the mechanism of a constitutional amendment to further consolidate his power in state government when it's already disproportionately strong here. So I would rather not have a constitutional convention and force him to put things on a statewide ballot individually on an issue by issue basis and let the voters individually determine that rather than go in and run the risk of some omnibus rewrite of the Constitution that further consolidates his power. That's not a risk that I want to take.
Yeah, but you know what, Chris? I think it's a real risk that we're running because the only thing that stood between us and that constitutional convention last year was Senator Cleo Fields. And he's
You
not
know
there
what?
anymore.
That's exactly right. A Democrat who we have absolutely nothing in common with except have some appreciation for him for blocking that committee hearing that would have allowed a constitutional convention to occur. So I'm thankful to Cleo Fields for that. And that will probably be the first and last time I thank Cleo Fields for just about anything as it relates to government or political philosophy.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, next up today, Senate Judiciary C is meeting this afternoon, 12:30, and one bill before the committee is House Bill 64 by Representative Mike Johnson. This is we followed this pretty closely, Chris, right? This
Yeah.
is giving the AG the ability to step in when the federal government's overreaching in a locality.
Yeah, and I'm going to testify for this bill because it's a good bill. We've been supporting this legislation, and it just reasserts our state sovereignty through the Attorney General and the government to nullify or to rescind any agreements between any local municipality and the federal government that violates our 10th Amendment state sovereignty rights. So it's a great bill. I publicized this and praised Mike Johnson publicly for bringing this bill. I think and the Attorney General because she supports it. So I'm very thankful for this, and this is an important piece of legislation. And so I'm going to go down and testify before Governmental Affairs. Oh, is it
Yeah, House Governmental Affairs.
House Governmental
Is it
Affairs
is that
on
right?
this? Yeah,
Oh no, sorry, Senate Jude C.
that's right. Right, I had it written down as UT, but I'm going to go testify in favor of this because
Okay.
it's important.
All right, Senate Judiciary A is meeting today as well. They're storied in my book. Okay, so they're meeting today at 1. They're hearing Representative Amade's bill, House Bill 371. We haven't really talked much about this, if we've talked about it at all, but this is her bill to protect the free exercise of religion in the state of Louisiana against tyrannical discrimination.
Yeah, exactly. And the bill, Danielle, was moved by vote in the Senate yesterday, referred to the Senate Education Committee. It's not going before the Judiciary Committee anymore. It was referred to Senate Education.
Why Senate Education?
The issue in the case has to do with whether or not a church or a church related facility can be used as a school, as an educational religious education center or school. So that's why it does fall at least somewhat under the rubric of education. But they're
Okay.
moving it to the Education Committee in the Senate. They don't meet today. I think they meet tomorrow. And I
Okay.
don't think the bill's been scheduled yet, but hopefully it'll be scheduled for tomorrow because I think it's important, and I plan to testify on this.
Okay, great. And then in Senate Judiciary B today, there's a bill that we did mention earlier, House Bill 307 by Representative Henry Chance. This is the bill that would require our public officials, our staff, basically anyone who works for the government, that if someone is an illegal immigrant and they're applying for public assistance, they have to be reported to ICE.
Yeah, so between this bill and Blake Miguez's bill, it's all going to be covered. Miguez's bill just requires an itemization specifically of how much money and public benefits is going to illegals. This bill specifically requires that any public agency with which a illegal immigrant is applying for public benefits has to report that to ICE. And I believe, Danielle, that it also requires reporting on illegal immigrants who may currently be receiving public benefits. They have to be reported to ICE. So both of these bills, in my opinion, Chance Henry's and Blake Miguez's, are very important and very needed.
Yeah. And it would go along quite well with Jay Morris's SB 8 because we would want to be able to fire the people who are not doing this.
Yes. And Jay Morris has yet another bill. I think it might be, I can't think of the number on it right now, but it's a bill that creates the crime of malfeasance in office for any public official who fails to report the status of an illegal immigrant and their legal status to ICE.
Chris, can I ask you, would that apply to Secretary of State Nancy Landry?
That's a interesting point.
Yeah.
Interesting point.
All right, we're just going to stew on that. Okay, House Bill 457 by Representative Denise Marcel. This is her bill to allow or require that anyone who is in solitary confinement have access to educational and religious materials, also being heard today in Senate Judiciary B.
Yeah. And I'm very glad that this bill is going through the system. As we've talked about before, Danielle, people in solitary confinement, they should, it's punishment enough to be in solitary confinement. And they should have access to not only educational materials while they're there, but also religious materials. We asked her to include that. She did. Hopefully this goes all the way through the process and gets signed.
Yeah, I hope it does. Okay, what we're expecting on the House floor today, House Bill 601 by Representative Brett Guyman. This is probably the most important bill related to private property, related to carbon capture of the session. I mean, it's the only one left standing.
Hugely important. And it was because of a lot of pushback and a lot of pressure that we and others were able to get this bill back before the House Natural Resources Committee voted out of committee and onto the House floor. And it has to get voted on. There's been a lot of pressure. And a lot of people have been telling Representative Guyman that regardless of how they vote on this, there's got to be a record vote that's very valuable. Republicans need to go on the record either for or against private property rights in Louisiana. There needs to be a vote. This is a hugely important item of legislation, Danielle, and we have our eyes on this very, very closely on the House floor today.
Yeah, and this will be a referendum on anyone who votes against it. And I dare to say it's a referendum on anyone who had the temerity to be absent for this vote. I mean, basically, the speaker should just lock the doors on this one. I anticipate that the speaker votes against the bill because he has voted against every single thing related to carbon capture when he didn't even need to make a vote. So I just find all of that remarkable, and we will be taking very close note, and a lot of legislators stand to be primaried.
HB 601. You know what we could start saying, Danielle? A lot of these legislators might get South Dakota.
Yeah, they will. You're right. They absolutely will. Okay, next up, Senate Bill 117 by Senator Blake Miguez. This was meant to be heard yesterday as well. It's back on the calendar for today. This is his ban on ultra-processed foods in schools. I kind of wonder, Chris, if he's just holding on to this one since Senator Mcma's bill was so similar to it and it has made it all the way through. I don't know if there's a need for this bill, but anyway, we'll see. I mean, I don't know if there's any remarkable difference between the two.
It's a good bill, largely complementary to Senator Mcma's bill, which we supported and testified in favor of. And that may be what Miguez is doing.
Yeah. All right. Next up, House Bill 206 by Representative Michael Mellerin. This, Chris, you can't even I mean, Democrats don't play the dirty tricks that these Republicans are playing. They
Mm-mm.
really don't. They really don't. So, just would you talk about this bill? I mean, this is the bill to make all illegal actions by the Secretary of State or clerks of court, registrar of voters, related any actions related to elections that are illegal to make them retroactively legal.
Yeah, exactly. Any agreements that are entered into by election officials in Louisiana with third parties, like consent agreements regarding our election processes or procedures, if they're illegal, this bill provides a mechanism for the legislature to ratify those illegal, lawless agreements through a streamlined concurrent resolution process that they can even do remotely through email, and doesn't require a bill to be passed curing the illegality and to go to the governor's desk and be subject to court scrutiny. None of that. It's a streamlined process. Okay, we know what you did was illegal here, but we're going to ratify it through a concurrent resolution. And I don't understand why they would be doing this. If something's illegal, it's illegal. Declare it illegal. And if you want to pass a bill
Yeah.
that cures that illegality and makes a new law, do it. But this is not the right way to go about it.
But you know why, Chris? Because there's no law that they can pass that would not be an illegal law to do what they are trying to do. Is that right? I mean, you can't supersede the federal government's definition of gerrymandering, which is what they're trying to do.
Well, exactly. And they don't, the legislature does not want Secretary Landry, Governor Landry, I suspect, they don't want to have to go back to the legislature and draw up a new district that actually is constitutional, or rely on the old district. In both of those scenarios, Cleo Fields doesn't have a congressional seat anymore. He's going to finish this term and he'd be done. And they don't want to go through that process. And so this is, I think, a backdoor way, and Paul Hurd has suggested it, that once the Supreme Court terminates Cleo Fields' current seat, because it's a racial gerrymander, the one the legislature drew up most recently over our objection, once that's overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, this bill would allow Secretary Landry to enter into a consent agreement with Cleo Fields, drawing up a new district that is equally unconstitutional, and then submitting that to the federal court and saying we have a new district for him. And even if it's challenged, Danielle, in all likelihood, as Paul Hurd said, by the time this got through the process and all the rest of it, Cleo Fields would already be serving his second term. So that's what's probably going on here. Otherwise, the bill makes no sense. But HB 206 is really, really a horrendous piece of legislation. And it was kicked up once again on the Senate floor yesterday because of a lot of pushback on it from us and others. So it's back on the calendar again today, and we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens, Chris. What's the legal remedy for that? Basically, we'd have to see them utilize the law. Someone would have to do something illegal, then the legislature would have to, basically they'd have to use the law so somebody could sue them for injury.
Yeah, they would have to use the law, which would result in a cognizable injury to somebody. Once they use the law through this concurrent resolution, very likely a candidate who was running against Cleo, a Republican, and then they could bring an action on that basis.
Chris, isn't there a constitutional provision for nullification where if a law is patently unconstitutional, the people can just declare it so and not pay attention to it, or it can be thrown
That's
out?
a joint concurrent resolution, Danielle, that we actually helped to draft 2 years ago in 2023, that just declares the solemn right of the Louisiana legislature to nullify any act of the federal government that violates the Constitution. But this consent agreement that we're talking about here, that would be ratified through a concurrent resolution, would be an agreement entered into between our Secretary of State and or our governor, probably our Secretary of State, and Cleo Fields, or someone who have a similar interest to Cleo Fields.
No, I'm saying, isn't there in our federal constitution a provision for the citizens to nullify any law that is unconstitutional?
That's not in the federal Constitution itself, but it is certainly in the Federalist Papers.
Okay.
That our founding fathers relied heavily on when writing the Constitution. There's no question about it. Well, actually, in Marbury v. Madison, I think is what you're referring to. The U.S. Supreme Court said that any law that is obnoxious to the Constitution is null and void on its face. So, yes, to answer your question, but that's not written directly in the Constitution. But an old and very, very honored Supreme Court case has said that. Absolutely null and void any law that violates the Constitution. And all of our founding fathers believed in the states and in the citizens' right to unilaterally nullify any action of the federal government or any law that is contrary to the Constitution. So if it would apply to the federal government, you'd think it would apply to the state government as well. So if this consent agreement that would be anticipated here is unconstitutional or illegal, you would think that it could be nullified, but how do you nullify it? How does the same body that passed the law nullify it?
No. And it's my appreciation that there was the original intent of juries was not only to decide the fate of a case, but it was also to decide the fate of a law, because it wasn't the initial intent of juries to be able to not only say, hey, this person is guilty or innocent, but if the law itself was stupid, or unconstitutional, the jury could say, well, we just completely disagree with the premise of the law and therefore throw out the entire case and the law.
Exactly. Danielle, that's a great point. One of the biggest tragedies of the way our modern jurisprudence has developed is that the honored doctrine of jury nullification in the United States has been completely wiped out. You're exactly right. Our founding fathers insisted that the jury is the master of both the facts and the law. The jury is supreme over both the law and the facts. And if a jury determines that a law itself is unfair or unjust or violative of the Constitution, then they have every right or even encouraged to reject the law, even if under the facts the defendant broke that law. And that was something that both lawyers and judges insisted that jurors know, okay? But now juries still have that right, but neither the lawyers nor the judges are allowed. The judges won't let the lawyers tell the juries that they have that right.
Because the judges think they are the law.
Exactly. So that effectively puts the judge as supreme in the courtroom above the jury, which was the government above the people. And that's what the founding fathers were trying to guard against. But you're right, Danielle. It's truly sad that jury nullification has been eroded and destroyed in our legal system the way it has.
All right. Well, let's talk about SB 214. This bill is another attempt at consolidation of executive power. It would provide for the Commissioner of Insurance to no longer be elected by us, we the people, but instead appointed by the governor.
Yeah.
I think people are beginning to see why we're so concerned about governor appointments, Chris. I think that it's starting to catch on why that's so concerning to us by what we're seeing this session, if people didn't already have their own concerns about it, which I'm sure they did, because they've all lived through some terrible governors too. But this one's been subject to call since May 20th. So we don't have, I think we may be able to head this one off.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so. It's terrible. The Commissioner of Insurance is a statewide position. He should be accountable to the people. I don't know who put Royce Duplessis up to this,
Jeff
but
Landry.
it may be. Although he says, well, it wouldn't be applicable until
after this
commissioner's gone.
Sure.
And Landry are gone. So Landry wouldn't be able to make the appointment. But still, though, it's still political, it's still political reprisal. It's still a slap in the face of the Commissioner of Insurance. What would you do if you're a sitting Commissioner of Insurance? You've been elected by the people. You're doing the best job you could do to serve the people. And you have a bill coming through to make your position appointed. Do you think that's a positive commentary on the job that you're doing? I don't think so.
Well, if the commentary is coming from Senator Royce Duplessis, I wouldn't be too concerned.
Well, very good point. Very good point. But hopefully this dies on the vine.
All right, Chris. Tomorrow, let's talk about what's on tap We're reaching the end, folks. So I know this has been a lot, but in Senate Health and Welfare tomorrow morning, Representative Chuck Owen is bringing his House Bill 690, and this is directing the Surgeon General to create a set of rules for how we should proceed with emergency use authorizations. That's an important one.
Very important. Everything that Chuck Owen does is meritorious, always focused on protecting the citizens against government overreach. I mean, I would literally charge the gates of hell with a water pistol with Chuck Owen.
Yeah. And some days it feels like we are.
And some days it feels like we're shooting water pistols, but guess what? We're not. We are not.
Okay, next up tomorrow, Chris, is House Bill 528 by Representative Brian Boriak. This is his bill that would transform the organizational structure of DOTD. I haven't seen very much headwinds for this bill. I think we expect it to probably do pretty well, but it will be heard in Senate Transportation tomorrow.
Yeah. And I think it's a good bill. As I said earlier, Danielle, if there's one thing that we can all agree on, despite Joe Donahue's best efforts, he's dealing with a huge bureaucracy. Yeah. There's one thing Republicans and Democrats alike can agree on. It's that DOTD needs to be more efficient and timely in completing of projects and needs to be more organized in its structure. So I don't see any problem with this bill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to see more accountability. I want to see it'd be easier to fire people who are in there for the wrong reasons or who are not doing a good job. Period.
Totally agree.
That's the end of my list, Chris. Is there anything else that you've got eyes on that I might have missed?
No, I think we're in good shape. We've talked about other things, and we're going to do a comprehensive wrap up, obviously, when the session's over, and we'll do another one or two before that. But I think, Danielle, the great service that we're providing is not only assisting in getting some good legislation through, beating back some bad legislation, but for the first time, at least in my memory, in my life, Republican legislators are being called out and exposed by name for the way that they vote on critically important legislation. It's hugely important, both in committee and on the floor. And so you're not going to get that anywhere besides the State of Freedom or anywhere besides LACAG. So make sure that you continue to support LACAG and the State of Freedom so that we can continue to advance, continue to grow, continue to develop. Because, our voice, if it's broad enough and powerful enough, is really all you need. That's all you need.
Yeah. And Chris, you remind us very often of JFK's famous words that we get the government that we demand and we deserve. And so I just have to say, I expect more from this government. We voted for people in good faith that they would do what they said they would do. We expect them to do what they said they would do. We expect them to go there and represent the interest of the people. And if they don't, and when they don't, they will hear about it.
They will absolutely 100% hear about it. We need to demand good government, which is what we're continuing to do. And one of the ways that you demand good government is by punishing elected officials who vote for things that are not good government or that give us bad government. And that's why it's important. So the State of Freedom in LACAG, LACAG.org, freedomstate.us, support us, share, subscribe, and let's continue forward, Danielle. We've been guaranteed the victory. The victory is ours. We just have to continue to move forward, continue to claim it. We may lose some battles along the way, but the victory will be ours.
That's right, Chris. And if you want to make sure that your voice is heard and that your legislator has no way to say that they didn't understand the way people wanted them to vote, go to lacag.org and take action on all of the bills that matter to you.
Go to LACAG.org Action Center today, now, and do it. It takes a few minutes to do, and your freedom, your liberty, and your voice are worth it.
That's right. All right, Chris. Well, I know you got to run to the legislature. Thank you for representing us there today and always. And we will be talking to you on Thursday, 8 a.m. for the latest on what's happened and what to expect in the final stretch.
God bless. Talk to you soon.
God bless you. The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.